here this afternoon now. Sorry again, I was out last month. It was a medical emergency for a family member. Everything's okay. But we are getting close to the end of our chronological study of Suwannee County's history. We've got this one and one more. And then the rest of the 3-year series is, it's about a year and a half left, will be topical stuff, different things, military history, African-American history, railroads, different things. But this is, it will be close to the end of the chronological history that we do today. We've been looking at the now we're getting to the late 1900s, and we're looking at basically the post-Hurricane Dora era up through the 1970s. So this map is the closest I've got to 1964. It's from 1958, from the centennial of Suwannee County's history. County commissioners put out a little brochure booklet, and that was the cover of it, or a poor photocopy of the cover of it. And it shows the major roads, the major railroad, and some of the communities. Some of them were still here at this point, but then again, places like Hildreth really wasn't much left by the 1960s, 1970s, maybe one store kind of thing. But that shows the county more or less as it was post-Dora. So, after 1964, there were a lot of dramatic changes, especially in Live Oak, because Live Oak was the one that was hit the hardest by Dora, all those inches of rain, downtown flooded. If you were here when Debbie hit in 2012, it was kind of like that, except Debbie was actually worse. But pretty much downtown Live Oak had flooded, so a lot of businesses decided they needed to move, or they needed to rehab, or something like that. So a lot of them would buy up some of these old buildings that by this point were 60, 70, 80 years old, and they decided to start tearing them down. So we lost a lot of old businesses, a lot of old buildings, a lot of old houses that had been here during the heyday of Live Oak, when it was the 5th largest city. A lot of them go bye-bye in this decade we're talking about. Places like the Parsley Building, the Suwannee Hotel, even Governor Carey Hardy's house, which when it was built in the early 1900s was way out of town. Those things made way for newer, better buildings, so they thought. Again, combination of flooding, old buildings, and then this era of out with the old, in with the new, postmodern, all that modern, postmodern stuff, Frank Lloyd Wright. Not as pretty, in my unprofessional opinion, buildings got put up in place of some of these old, beautiful buildings. But it is what it is. So, some of those being torn down, and actually you can see from this picture here from the late 60s, early 70s, that's the courthouse in the middle of it. And you see the Suwannee Hotel right here, built in the early 1900s. And by this point, the bank had already replaced the old Parsley Building, which we'll show a couple pictures in a few minutes. But even at this point, there have been some changes made to the downtown area of Live Oak. So for instance, in 1966, Commercial Bank bought the home of former Governor Hardy, which Hardy had passed on a few years before, but the Commercial Bank purchased his property, and they constructed a new bank there. It was TD Bank, I guess, last I checked, but this was what Governor Hardy's house looked like during the better years. I think he believed he died in 1957 or 1958. But they tore it down, rebuilt it with this building here, Commercial Bank, which was one of the two major banks we had downtown, like 90, 129, that interchange. They needed more space. They basically were at the point where it was getting flooded at when Dora hit. That was kind of the maximum amount of where the water rose, was that area. And again, more cars, they needed more space, more parking. Downtown was just too crowded, so they moved out. Again, this used to be way out of town in the early 1900s. It's across from Hardee's, and no, Governor Hardy did not own Hardee's restaurant. Just one of those ironic twists of fate there, that Hardee's went up across the street from where he lived. But this bank, the odd thing about this building, and I learned it about probably 20 years ago when we were looking at it for some office space upstairs, was there's no elevator. There was not an elevator at that point, which is kind of odd for a building built in the 60s. Because we were looking at it in the clerk's office, we were looking at it for furniture storage. And when we found out there was no elevator, there was no way we were going to load furniture, desks and stuff upstairs. So we had to say, thank you. There basically wasn't a big elevator And if there was an elevator, it was one of those very small ones. But anyway, it still operates today as TD Bank. Let's see. It was mercantile at that point. Probably need to update the picture. Other teardowns. First National Bank, which was where Hal Air's office is today on US 90 West or Howard Street West, was heavily flooded. I showed pictures at the last presentation where the water had gotten about this high in the bank. And so they also wanted to move and expand. And so they purchased the old Parsley building, which is there on the right-hand side from this 1935 picture. They purchased it, tore it down, and rebuilt the bank on top of it. It's one of those things, when I first learned about the Parsleys owning this area across from the courthouse, and the Parsley house, that's where the John and Nancy Parsley's house was on that property. And I got a little concerned when I realized they had been buried there, because I look out and there was a parking lot over where their graves were. But then I learned that they had been moved before they put the asphalt down. So that's good. They're in the Live Oak City Cemetery, if you want to look. But anyway, so the Parsley building, built by the Parsley family, early 1900s, they tore it down, First National Bank. And another one of the buildings that was torn down in this era, or right after, was where this place was. This was a little, trying to remember what it says, it's hard to see. Lunch and Beer. I forget whose place that was. But again, that was 1935. It was torn down, replaced by a different building. It used to be a pizza place in the late 70s, early 80s. Then it became Sports Connection for many, many years. And now it's Amazing Grays, I believe, is what it's called. But that was pictured in 1935. And this is the bank and the pizza place, called the Pizza Place, in 1974. So the same era sees those buildings torn down. Much more space, much bigger. This one does have an elevator, because I've been in it before.
Was it the Parsley building where Doc Adams had his office?
Yeah, all that. So it had all that stigma attached to it. So, I mean, there are lots of other, Western Auto was there, and lots of other companies. It's again one of those two-story buildings we were talking about earlier before the presentation that had lots of shops and stores, first and second floors. But it was old, dilapidated, and they tore it down. And Doc Adams' murder might have something to do with it also. So, post-Dora, we also in 1965 get our first shopping center per se. And that's the Live Oak Plaza, which was on the east side of town. It had Winn-Dixie, McCrory's, Sears, and Sherwin-Williams. Those were the main stores when it opened up. This picture from the late 60s, very early 70s, shows pretty much those stores. Winn-Dixie, McCrory's. The other ones I can't read, but presumably some of those I just mentioned. But that was the plaza. I know that my parents' age, that was where they'd go to hang out. Even kids my age would go to hang out there a lot, out on the plaza. At night when they were closed, just hang out in the parking lot. Lots of parking space. Who knows what all they did? I wasn't one of those kind of kids that did that. So I don't know what they did. But they at least hung out. I'll throw that out there. But like a lot of plazas, that kind of was a shell of its former self. There's a few stores there, but it's nothing like what it used to be. You don't see that many cars there anymore. Also in 1965, there was discussion by the Suwannee County Development Authority, and that was set up a few years prior by the legislature to basically help develop economic stuff in Suwannee County, businesses especially, trying to bring them in. It's a quasi-governmental entity. It's the people are appointed by the county commission, those kinds of things. But they are a way to bring business in without having to go before the county commission in a public meeting and air everything. So the development authority kind of helps behind the scenes, get things taken care of, so these folks can come in without prices going up. I mean, if you knew Walt Disney World was coming in, you'd raise your prices, wouldn't you? So this is the development authority's way for them to come about that without having to go through the whole public meeting, everybody hears about it. And so in 1965, the development authority was looking at developing some area around Suwannee Springs. Several hundred acres had become available, and either had been purchased or donated by the Development Authority. And they were actually looking at it to be used as some sort of amusement park. They actually went all the way up to Six Flags over Georgia, looked at it, they liked that idea, and so they brought that back to the county, and even brought it before the county commission discussed it. They were in favor of it, but it actually did not pan out. Even though the county purchased the property, the Development Authority purchased the property, that part did not pan out. But then they sold that park to the Cornett family, and of course, you know today the Spirit of the Suwannee Music Park. So it's not an amusement park, although some of the folks there, after they've had a little bit to drink, can be amusing, from what I've been told. It's a different kind of park. It still brings in lots of people, you know, tens of thousands of people. And it just is not the amusement park we have, which is probably good because for most of my life I've lived about 2.5 miles down from it. And it's bad enough when Spirit of the Suwannee kicks up over the weekends when I was living there that it was hard to sleep, let alone an amusement park every night of the week. So, but it would have brought in a lot of tourism stuff too. And I'm not sure when Wild Adventures started in Valdosta, but that might have had something to do with it too. Is, well, let's get one in South Georgia before North Florida gets something. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. All right, school system changes. School system changes. By 1960, we have talked about this over the previous several months, that Suwannee County by the early 1900s had over 100 schools, mainly one-room schools, but had over 100 schools in the county. But as automobiles became more accessible, as buses began to be used, there was really no need for all those one-room schoolhouses. And so the last one shut down, I talked about it in my last presentation, so it would have been in the 50s probably, when it shut down. So by 1960, there were only 7 schools in the entire county. There was Live Oak, Branford, Welborn, Clayland, and McAlpin, and those were for the white students. And then the African-American students had O'Brien and Douglas being here in Live Oak. And so down from 100 plus to 7, and they began to consolidate even further. So in 1963, McAlpin lost its 7th and 8th grades. They came over to Live Oak and or Branford, depending on where they were. And so McAlpin lost basically its middle school. So it was down to basically elementary. O'Brien, same thing happened. It lost its upper class, middle and high school students, or junior high and high school, depending on how you call it. And they were left with pretty much elementary grades. And it continued to happen. Well, in the meantime, Douglas Center, as they were getting more students being brought in, they needed to upgrade some of their facilities, and so they built a new gym. And that's it a few years ago. It's looking a little bit better, thankfully, than that. But that's what it looked like a few years ago. And so that was kind of, they had the plan, they were making it, putting it in motion. But then Hurricane Dora hit. And when Dora hit in '64, that threw out their plans, and they had to make a whole lot of other changes. First off, school was closed for a week because of the flooding and trying to recuperate from all the flooding. The other thing is the high school, which this was the high school at the time, often called the Metcalf School, built in 1928, I believe, memory serves. I didn't put it down. I believe built in 1928. They could not reopen the school because a sinkhole had developed underneath a portion of it, because that was where the flooding was some of the worst, was in this area. I didn't put it in here, but when Dora hit, I've got some pictures of it showing how flooded this area was, and a sinkhole developed. Now, you probably don't remember, but when we were talking about the 1930s, shortly after the building was constructed, I think in 1935 it was, there was a little bit of subsurface movement on one of the corners. And so they had to shore it up. They had to basically cut off that wing for a little while they shored it up. So apparently it was a lot bigger problem than what they realized. And Dora told them, hey, we just can't reopen this building. And so they had to move those students elsewhere. So when they did resume school, some of them went to First Baptist, some of them went to the old Armory, and then pretty much wherever else they could stuff them while they made some plans. Eventually, about 2 months after Dora hit, in November of '64, they decided, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to move grades 4 through 6 and the junior and senior high schools to the relatively new Pineview Elementary School building. We're going to use that property. We're going to use that site. We're going to put those kids there. We're going to leave grades 7 and 8 where they are, which was a school building next door to this on part of the First Baptist lot now, where their Family Life building is, Family Ministry building is. There was another, the junior high was there, so it's like, all right, y'all can stay there. High school students have to move, and then they're going to build a new elementary school and rebuild Branford High School. So they start doing that. 1965, the voters decided to enter into a bond to construct some of those new schools. And so that's what they do. They have to build some new schools. So in March of 1965, the contract is awarded to expand the Pineview Elementary School to convert that into Suwannee High School, which is what it is today. Convert that and add to it, and also to build a new Branford School. And then in April, they continue their consolidation of schools. For instance, McAlpin School, Clayland and Welborn, by 1967, they're closed up, and those kids go to the new schools. In 1966, they also proposed a new elementary school west of the Pineview School, and that becomes Suwannee Elementary West. That's what elementary school is. West was the best, and East was the beast, or the least. Of course, East school students would say West was the pest. Either way, they built the Suwannee Elementary West, and then it became Suwannee Intermediate, and now it's Springcrest Elementary. I have to look because I still call it West. It was West and East. And my wife taught at East, but it was elementary school. Okay, 10 years ago or so. But anyway, so Springcrest Elementary became the elementary school. Also, at the same time as they're expanding the schools, they built the VOTEC, the Suwannee Hamilton Vocational Technical Center, which became River Oak College in 2015. This picture here is Clayland School, 1950, which again was about 15 years before it closed up. And so these students pretty much shifted to either Lywood or Branford. And that's kind of how it is today. While all this is going on, you've got another issue or another event that happens, and that is desegregation. So in 1965 is when it first occurs. 74 black students asked for assignment at white schools. In the following year, the 65-66 school year, it happens. There is not really that much of an issue. I've heard of some fights and that kind of stuff, but nothing like what you see or you saw maybe on television. No riots, no blasting with fire hoses, anything like that, explosions, nothing like that. The last segregated class to graduate from Douglas High was in 1969, and at that point, the county was fully desegregated, and the Douglas High School became Suwannee Middle School, which is what it was my first year until they built current middle school over here, that way, yeah. Wasn't so good of a school when I was going there. It was kind of falling apart. This is a picture of it in more recent years, although by that point, after the new middle school was built in 1990, it became an alternative school. Small pre-K kid programs like 4Cs and things like that were there. And also the county's EOC is in that area. Still is for now. Unfortunately, the buildings were in bad shape over the years and just got worse and worse. So they tore them down in 2019, most of it. The gym is still there, the EOC building is still there, and that's pretty much it. All these buildings in this picture were taken down 4 years ago. So, that's the school stuff for a bit. Other things going on in the 1960s and the 1970s, we've got Goldkist moving in. It opens up in 1967, provides about 1,500 jobs. I believe it's our largest job producer in the county at this point. It was Goldkist up through the point that I was in high school and stuff, and then it became Pilgrim's Pride after I became an adult. I still call it Goldkist sometimes out of habit, just like I call well, anyway, other places old things too. And I guess I'm getting old like that. I just went blank. Oh, so anyway, new businesses are still coming into Suwannee County. The mining company. What's the mining company in Hamilton County?
PCS.
PCS.
Occidental.
But it was Occidental. I call it Occidental, but it's PCS. Been PCS for probably 30 years now, 25 years, but I still call it Occidental sometimes.
It's Nutrien now.
Is it Nutrien? Okay, whatever. See, you can't keep, it's like the schools. I can't keep up with them. It's Old West, it's Old East. There we go. Just tell me that. Although they're north and south of one another, which I always thought was funny. But again, West was the best, so I didn't care. Other things going on. Period of growth. The Eisenhower interstate system that had been approved under President Dwight Eisenhower's era was finally getting into Florida and was pretty much finished up during this era we're looking at. The portion between Falmouth and I-75 was completed in 1969, and the entire portion through Florida was completed in 1978. So the interstate worked out. This is a picture near the I-75 interchange, somewhere around Indian Ford. So of course that created a lot of changes, a lot of growth in certain areas, and it also saw some areas like downtown Live Oak kind of lose some of their businesses as they either went out of business or they moved out by the interstate. 1975 also saw something else, and that was the end of the Vietnam conflict. A lot of people call it a war. Technically, it was not a war. Congress never declared war, but me and everybody else calls it Vietnam War a lot anyway. But that conflict ended with North Vietnam capturing South Vietnam. We had already pulled out in 1973 after the Paris Peace Treaty, and the South Vietnamese held out for a couple more years, but it didn't work out. So we have the end of that long-running conflict. 60,000 Americans are killed, 350,000 wounded, a lot of others with permanent emotional scars. So it was a bad time. And it's, you know, a war in a way we kind of, in a way, I guess, lost, and we're not used to that, so it's hard. Plus all the civil upheaval during that era, our veterans did not get the respect they should have gotten, like they've gotten in previous wars. It's just, it's tough to hear stories and to see reports and to watch videos and stuff of what was happening. Especially when you realize some of these folks that died in Vietnam were from Suwannee County. Several folks here mentioned Otto Wayne Awe. Last week I was in Dowling Park doing this presentation, and one of the gentlemen who moved here, who's now in Dowling Park, he was in the same unit and was with Wayne Otto when he died, so he was able to tell that story, which I thought was very interesting. But he came to Suwannee County to meet the family, and he stuck around. So very interesting. Duncan Bass died at 66. Thomas Hart was in an AC-130 over Laos. That's a whole nother issue, a whole nother topic. But we were over in Laos trying to interdict before they got into North Vietnam, and his plane was shot down in 1972. And he was missing in action until they were discovered in 1985. And from what I've been told, I was too young to remember, but in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, there were a lot of pins honoring him. His wife was trying to get people to find him, you know, the government to figure out where he was, and finally in 85 it happened. But I've heard stories of, I think, yellow pins, ribbons, something like that. Yes, sir.
All those guys buried here in the county?
I know some of them are. I'd have to go back and look and see, or check with Veterans Admin, but I know some of them are. I'm not sure about Thomas Hart, but I believe Otto Wayne Awe is. At least some of them are. I don't remember offhand which ones though. Yeah, Larry Jenkins, Perry Johnson, James Wall. So those are several folks from Suwannee County that were killed in action. Others, and these were actually in action. There were other ones that died maybe in accidents and such after that. I've heard of a few others. And that's unfortunate. So we lost a lot. The country lost a lot, and kind of all for naught, to be honest. Between rules of engagement and stuff, but I'm going to stop there because I can get political sometimes on some of this stuff. They weren't always allowed to do their job. Anyway, moving on. Post-Vietnam conflict, we've got more businesses opening up, especially those that are coming to the interchanges. One of them being the Badcock Corporation warehouse, which they constructed on a 40-acre tract of land near I-10 US 129. Building is still there. It's being used by other companies. And the county right now actually is looking at updating and expanding the road to that to allow for more businesses to come in between the two hotels right there. And where Fusion Restaurant is, that road, 68th Street, I believe. Just a two-lane, bad shape road. The county is looking at expanding it to a 3-lane and allowing more businesses to be able to get back there, providing water and sewer, that kind of stuff. So they're still looking at it. But it's still being used by other companies. Lots of gas stations, fast food restaurants, especially 129. Now, the I-10 exit at 90, for some reason, just didn't pop up. There were a couple of gas stations there at one point, which they're torn down now. But when I was little, I remember them being in operation. They're working on that too. Right now, that's the catalyst site area. So there's a lot of big businesses close to the interchange by the railroad access. But 129 is building up. It continues to build up. It's technically in the county, not in the city limits, but it's on the border of it. And the city has provided like water to Walmart, things like that. So lots of politics involved with that area also, but it is definitely building up. They've got more buildings building right now. It's got Starbucks, Firehouse Subs, and a cell phone company are going up right now. Suwannee Crossing, I believe, is what it's called, right there by the interchange. So that's going up right now. So lots of businesses coming in. Agriculture was still a focus in Suwannee County, as it continues to be today. And in 1970, February, the first agricultural exposition for Florida opened up, and they held it at our Coliseum. So that was kind of a big deal. And what they did was they demonstrated some of the improved equipment that was out there and available, and also farming techniques to get better crops, to make it cheaper for you to provide, those kinds of things. So they did that. It was a great success. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Rural Area Development Council, RADC, helped provide that and set that up and sponsor it. Water management. The Water Management District moved to Live Oak. It became its seat, its headquarters. Don't ask me where it was originally. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've looked. But it was moved to Live Oak, where it still is today. And legislature had created the district along with these other districts that are there. I think that's still accurate. There may be more than that now, but at the point I put this in here, there were 5 districts. They are to manage water, related natural resources, and they help protect thousands of acres of wetlands and nature and the river, those kinds of things. One disadvantage, it makes it hard to get property on the river now. It makes it expensive when you do, because they own a lot of property, but they give you access. There's parks, there's a lot of springs and stuff that you can go into the property and look for, so that's pretty nice. Other area-wide things moving here in the 70s. Transit Authority, Suwannee Valley Transit Authority opens with 4 counties, Columbia, Hamilton, Lafayette, and Suwannee. And so that is a means to provide transportation services to rural areas. People that don't have vehicles, that can't afford it, or are in bad physical shape, they can't do it for whatever reason. Maybe they've had seizures, maybe they're, whatever it might be, they're unable to drive themselves. And so the Transit Authority, using buses and cars, are able to transport them for a nominal fee. And it was started with 4 counties. There are still 3 available in it, Suwannee, Hamilton, and Columbia. The first director was John Lawson of Live Oak. He painted. So a lot of the paintings you see in Live Oak and Suwannee County, he's the one that did those paintings years back. Now the current director is Larry Sessions, who's been it for, I don't remember, 5-6 years, but he's retiring in December from that. So this is their trolley. That's kind of a historical looking trolley they use for especially historical tours. Kind of fun to be on and ring the bell and that kind of stuff. So again, they provide transportation pretty cheap. I think it's only like $2. They can take you to the grocery store, take you to the doctor. Those kind of, it might be cheaper than just driving yourself. I saw that. So anyway, if your husband won't take you, just call him up. All right, so we've got new stuff coming in, but again, old stuff going away. One of them being the Seaboard Airline Depot. In 1972, we have a big storm, like a windstorm, and it blows part of the roof off. You can see over there in the right-hand portion. The building at this point was well over 70 years old. This is one of those buildings I'm not sure how old, because the insurance drawings I've got don't show that area. but it was there by the 1890s, let's put it that way. I'm pretty confident maybe even before that, before it was called Seaboard. But anyway, the old SAL depot, because of its age, because railroad service had diminished in Suwannee County, they decided not to repair it, and they sold it to have it torn down. So the gentleman that bought it tore it down, and you can see the Atlantic Coastline building in the back, which is now the museum. The Seaboard Airline Depot, they tore down, and the buyer who tore it down basically used the good beams to build himself a house and several outbuildings. He might have actually built a smaller house for a relative. But some of those beams were huge from looking at the newspaper articles. There was even in there was a predecessor to the battery kind of thing. It's pretty cool in the newspaper article talking about it. Just one of those old chemical battery kind of things they were making in the late 1800s, probably to run the Morse code before we had a lot of telephone service or anything like that. It's pretty interesting. But it was another one of those landmarks that had stood for the entire century being torn down. But all the stuff going on, probably the most important event in this period, you probably hadn't even heard of it, but the most important event in this period for Suwannee County happened on December 29th, 1977. You need to write that one down, that's important. Possibly a famous birth. All right, maybe not. I was born at the Suwannee County Hospital. Yeah, so that was me. That's why the question mark, famous birth, there. Anyway, the world has not been the same since, especially for me. I had to throw it in there. So now you know how old I am,
Yeah.
if you can add. Moving on, new City Hall, 1978. Live Oak had the old City Hall for 80 years. I'm sorry, 70 years. 1908-ish, 1909 period. They needed more space, and so they decided to buy up some property on East Howard Street. I believe it was the May House, one of the old houses, again, had been there for 100 years. Was torn down. They built the current City Hall. Again, it's one of those not impressive looking buildings. If you didn't see the sign outside that said City Hall, would you really even know it's City Hall? I mean, the old City Hall, which is now Chamber of Commerce on 129, with that majestic look and the portico and the tower and stuff, that looks like a municipal building. This one, again, it was the times. Lots of buildings like that they did. So it provides all the necessary functions. For many years, still the police department and fire department were at Old City Hall. Up until, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years ago, they had either built the new fire station or they purchased, the police department purchased the old CNB Bank just to the north, south, thank you, south of City Hall. And they've since purchased the old Daniels Funeral Home for their annex. So even that building was not enough, and they continue to expand even today. More new construction in the 1970s. We got our first mall, the Suwannee County Mall on Pinewood Way. It had about 25 or 30 stores. The major occupants originally were Winn-Dixie, TG&Y, Super Extra Drugs. I remember TG&Y. I remember going. I remember as a very young kid going into the mall area, and I believe there was like a fountain in the center with you could see the skyline, and a fountain, and you could sit around it, and I would sit there when my parents would go shoe shopping or whatever they were doing. So I vaguely remember it as a little boy. But by the mid-'80s, late 80s, most of the occupants had moved out. The mall part had shut down. And up until 15 years ago, there were very few stores there. Winn-Dixie was still there for a while. And the east side of the building was occupied and continues to be. Places like Robbie's Reef and Robbie's Cafe and other businesses still operate here on the east side. Now the west side, after the hurricane, I've seen some aerials of it, a lot of damage, lots of issues. So I don't know what's going to happen. Yes, ma'am.
I'm confused. You said first. I know where that one is.
Yes.
With the Winn-Dixie, but I thought the picture you'd shown before was the one over across from Brown Lantern.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
This one is across from Community Presbyterian.
Okay, you said first.
Yeah.
on both.
Well,
So
Well, that was the first plaza,
It
this
was
is the
a
first
plaza,
mall.
not a mall.
Yeah,
Oh, all right,
Yeah.
okay.
shopping
Thank you.
plaza versus mall.
All right, thank you.
Indoor versus outdoor, yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Sorry.
glad you asked that.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, that was the first plaza, this is the first mall.
Mall, okay.
So, and there's still, I mean, they got several shops in there, I've been in there a few times, and I know some government offices are looking at using it because it's got lots of parking. It's not being used, but it's just,
The building is, my husband looked in it because they were looking to buy, somebody was, and he said he would not put any money into
yeah,
it.
there's a lot of issues. Like I said, after the hurricane, it got worse. I've seen the post-hurricane video. Anyway, I'm glad I don't own it, let's put it that way.
Did that run its course just because it wasn't in a good location with the way everything else was developing?
Yeah, pretty much
Too
everything's
far
built
away from the.
by the
main flow
interstate.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah, because it was built about the time the interstate was coming through, so might have even been before it was finished. So they had no idea how much the interstate would attract businesses. But then, I mean, even with places with malls that aren't lively in Suwannee County, there's just kind of this, people are getting away from malls and going back to plazas, more outdoor stuff, and not wasting all the space, indoor space. So, I don't know, just different. I'm not a businessman like that, so I don't know all the intricacies of it, but people are out to make money, and apparently this one for sure was not making a lot of money. And probably rising prices, that kind of stuff, you know, the combination of factors. Other new construction, W.B. Howland Company, which was established in 1926. They had a small store, old store, so they needed to rehab and rebuild. So they constructed this one during this era we're looking at on 11th Street and continue to use it today. A lot bigger than what they had. I've seen a picture of the original, I don't know if it was the one that this one replaced, but the original store was very small and old. So
Wasn't it kind of downtown?
I'm not sure where that one was, to be honest. Now, I know Howland's had the gas station, which was just south of the courthouse, where that building is still there. At one point, that was Howland's gas station. But the actual store, I'm not even sure where it was, to be honest. I haven't done all that research. It may have been here, it may have been closer downtown. But nevertheless, this is where they built, and it's a lot bigger building. All right, 1978, we have a little issue here. Guy you might have heard of named Ted Bundy makes a stop through Suwannee County. His last victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, is found in Suwannee County, actually down the road I grew up on and lived most of my life on. And I would have been a baby at this point. And my mother actually fit the profile that he liked, and we lived on the road, so I mean, I'm glad he didn't stop at our house. But anyway, his last victim is found in Suwannee County. He is captured. He is tried, and this is basically right after he had killed several Florida State students, the Chi Omega murders. And so he is captured. His trial began in November of 1979 at our courthouse for Kimberly Leach's murder. But then, because of all the publicity, they had to change the venue down to Orlando, I believe. Let's see, yeah, Orlando, because of all the coverage. And so briefly he was in our jail, briefly he was in our courthouse. He did not escape from either one of them, which he had done before from other places. And he was found guilty of the Chi Omega murders. He was found guilty of Kimberly Leach's murder. And it comes out in these trials that the guy has killed at least 29 people, could be as much as 100 people. Girls, basically. Women for the most cases. 35 is the number usually associated with him, but he is one of those guys that would extend his stay because he was sentenced to die. And he would kind of say, hey, I'll tell you where some more bodies are if you let me hang around for a little bit longer. He kept doing that. Eventually they said no. 1989, he was executed. I remember because I was homesick from school. I would have been 11 and a half or so. And I remember watching the TV and that day coming on and interrupting, say, he's been executed. I didn't know who it was at the time, big deal, but it's like, get back to my cartoons or whatever it was I was watching. But yeah, he was executed. Yeah. That was Kimberly Leach, 12 years old. She was from Columbia County. He had taken her from the middle school over there and done all kinds of things to her and then left her down State Ships Road, County Road 132, before you get to the state park. in my years of presenting and talking about this, I've come across people who basically either they knew her or their parents knew her and went to school with her. So it's kind of, just brings that home a little bit more to the, it was close. It was close. All right, we've been talking about new construction, we've been talking about expansion, but we continue to see buildings be lost. One of them being the Alomar Theater. Now that building had been converted into a theater in the 1920s, I think 26 if memory serves, but in the mid to early 1920s. Alomar, combination of George Allison and Marvin Price, the two owners. Before that, it had been farming implements and that kind of stuff. So the building was, by the 1970s, it was 70 years old at least. And in 1977, it burned. I believe it's 1977. It burned. And one of my employees, her grandfather was a firefighter that helped on this. So these pictures are actually from her personal collection. She let me scan. So it burned up. Unfortunately, it was not salvageable at that point. And it was funny, ironic, what were they playing? Crime Busters, but then Smokey and the Bandit. So, lots of smoke with it, smoke damage. So, that had been around for 70 years. It was not our only movie theater, but it was one of the few we had by this point. And it may have been the only non-drive-in movie theater that we had by 1977. But again, I'm assuming 77. Both those movies came out then. So it was either 77, maybe very early 78. But it burned, and there was no way to really repair it. It was, again, an old building, out with the old, in with the new. This is, they tore it down. It's now called Alomar Court. It's a parking lot, but they honor the memory by calling it Alomar Court. Anyway, one of our nice, at one point, nice places to come and entertain yourself, gone. I don't know. Unfortunate. So we've got lots of changes, lots of additions, lots of expansion, interstate in the places out there in the big places. Schools are downsizing as we get into, early. So we get to the 1980s. This is a map from 1975, which is the closest to 1980 that I have. It shows the interstate now, meandering its way through the north part of the county. It shows the railroad, shows 90, 129, 51, a lot of the major roads. Actually, when you zoom in, this is one of those maps that shows basically every house if you zoom in far enough. So very detailed 911 addressing that, basically. So lots of changes. So next month when we get into it, next month, we'll be talking about the 1980s until today. And that'll finish up our chronological study, and then we will get into the topical study for another 15 or so presentations, year and a half or so. A lot of stuff changing over the years. All right. Well, thank you all. Let y'all out a few minutes early. Appreciate it. Lord willing, see y'all next month.